We spend our lives trying hard to become more experienced, more talented, more qualified. However, the ones who aren't spend every moment in time trying to close that gap but still fail, because that gap never closes, and the exhausting, uncomfortable truth is that for some people, it just never will. I was never the tallest person in any room I was in. Not in school, not on the court, not anywhere. For the longest, unimaginable amount of time, it felt like a sentencing. To me, it was as if the world had already decided something about me before I'd even had the chance to prove otherwise. I watched taller kids in school move through spaces with a kind of ease that wasn't accessible to a midget like me. I didn't have that, and I spent more time than I'd like to admit wishing that I did. I was feeling very small, both literally and metaphorically. I am a guy, and I would absolutely love to be adored and admired like how the tall guys from my school were, but no. I was nowhere near as tall as them, and it was more than enough to make me feel as small as I looked. My going home schedules were pretty much always accompanied with self-disappointment. And then, one weekend from 2014, my older brother rushed to me, speaking excitedly about this new anime he'd just found out about. It was Haikyuu, the volleyball anime. I was in my first years of high school by this time, finally hitting a bit of a growth spurt, and I picked it up because I loved volleyball and sports in general. What I didn't expect was to find a character who looked exactly like the version of myself I was still figuring out how to be okay with. Short, like super short, a bit loud, and overlooked by everyone who hadn't yet seen what he could do. Hinata walked onto that court against players twice his size. That hit differently than any advice I'd ever been given all my life about confidence or self-improvement. He wasn't just a lesson delivered to me. He was a living proof that the thing you've been ashamed of might be the most dangerous thing about you, if you'd only stop apologizing for it long enough to find out. When the name Hinata Shoyo gets mentioned, people think of his effort, heart, and the classic underdog who simply refuses to quit. Hinata is all of those things, but there is still something that a lot of people miss about his character. From the very first episode, Hinata walks into a world that has already decided who he is. Someone who is too small, too thin, too inexperienced to belong on the same court as the people he's up against, and the series wastes no time proving that point. Aone has the height he doesn't. Kageyama has the volleyball IQ he doesn't. Oikawa has the experience he doesn't. Ushijima has the raw, uncontainable power he doesn't. Every major player Hinata faces represents a different dimension of his more. And by every conventional measurement, Hinata loses that comparison every single time. But here is what that comparison misses entirely. Hinata never tried to win that comparison. He found his own way of fighting against them. While everyone around him was playing the game of being more, which is more height, more power, more technical precision, Hinata embraced the strength of being less, and he is way above them in this manner. When you are born with every advantage, you never have to get creative, never have to find the angles nobody else is looking for, and never feel the need to improve. Hinata, with every disadvantage towards the game, needed all of these, and obtained all of them. This is Hinata's weapon. Not just his insane vertical, his extreme speed, or his spiking power, his smallness itself. Being small led him to appreciate his speed, reflexes, and plyometric capabilities. Since he was small, he learned to adapt. He learned to utilize his approach speed by running 1 or 2 tempos faster than everyone, quick enough to leave them stunned and incapable of blocking his spikes. He learned to adjust his block timing against Seijo's Kindaichi, who is a much taller player than him. He learned to utilize his insane reflexes, that he even became able to run to the other side of the court while the opponents haven't reacted yet, even reaching the top of the net faster than even his 2-meter opponent. Hayakuzawa. He was able to block Ushiwaka's spike successfully with the distant block, no matter if it's just luck. He also learned the umbrella and feint shot that Bokuto taught him during their training camp, which he added to his skill set because he wasn't tall enough to spike the ball straight down when he's against very tall blockers. Hinata didn't pull all this off by sulking about being small. He was able to pull off all these things successfully because he made the decision to give up on wanting to be tall and poured all his focus into mastering all the ways and strategies a small player can do to fight well on the court. Here is where it gets personal. Because every adaptation, creative angle, and skill Hinata did on that court was built out of necessity, and it was only possible because of his decision to stop grieving what he wasn't and start building with what he was. That decision is available to every single one of us. The transition to early adulthood is arguably the most dangerous period for this exact problem. You are suddenly in rooms with people who seem to have more of everything: experience, confidence, connection, clarity about where they're going. The most natural response in the world is to spend your energy trying to close this gap, to become more like them, and to chase their version of qualified, their version of ready, their version of enough. But Hinata showed us that being and having more isn't the only path to take. He closed the gap not by being more, but by finding a proper workaround for being less. The moment you are measuring yourself against someone else's dimensions, like their height, their experience, their talent, their head start, then you have already lost because you are playing a game designed around everything you don't have. You will never win that game because the rules were written entirely for someone who isn't you. Remember this: Hinata didn't beat Ione by growing taller. He didn't beat Kageyama by becoming a setter. He didn't beat Ushijima by bulking up and sounding up like a 40-year-old guy like he does. He beat them by becoming so exceptionally specifically excellent at the things only someone his size could do that their advantages became completely irrelevant. This isn't about settling for less or accepting defeat or even pretending the gap doesn't exist. It is the conscious decision to pick up a completely different ruler, one built around your specific dimensions, and measure your progress against that instead. This is where most people get it wrong. They hear "embrace what you have," and they think it means lowering the standard. It actually doesn't. Hinata's standard and obsession with the game was never low. What changed was the direction he pointed it. He stopped pointing it at everything he lacked and aimed it entirely at everything he could build. The truth is, you don't need to be the biggest person in the room. You just need to be the one the room cannot afford to lose. And the only way to become that person is to stop trying to be someone else's version of more and become the most complete, most dangerous version of exactly what you already are. Improvement comes once you polish what you have and stop focusing on what you don't. This was Strategic Humility by the character Hinata Shoyo.